Hey, everybody. It's me. Welcome back to the Convo Couch. It's Fiorella, and I am here by myself today because Pasta is actually the one that's out of town today. And I am currently visiting family in Florida. I haven't even had a chance to share all the photos of all the places I went to. I was in Turkey, I was in different parts of Turkey, and then I went to Venezuela, and now I'm in Florida. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But we're also going to talk about what everybody's talking about, the US elections and all of that. So I want you guys to share the stream because there's going to be this is going to be a short show. I have another interview coming up that I have to record after this. And so it's going to be a short show, but I do want to say as much as I can while I'm in this interview. And Pasta and I will be doing a live show together, hopefully on Friday. We will see each other. I'm going to go drive down to see him, and hopefully we don't get into a fist fight because, as you both know, as you all know, I am in a crossroads here. We're in harsh disagreement on RFK. Um, as somebody that has studied elections, I just can't fathom why somebody like Pasta, who has also studied elections and knows how corrupt the Democratic Party is, has such an affinity over RFK. And it's not just him, it's a lot of people. And, I went on Misty's show recently, her radio show, when I was in Moscow, and we talked about this. Like, we just don't get it. To me, this electoral process it's a lost cause. And people say, well, somebody's got to be president, right? Somebody's going to win. Well, that's true, but they're not going to win because of your vote. They're going to win because they've been selected. And I think still in the back of their heads, some people still believe that we have fair elections. That maybe if we vote harder enough, if we do something, we can overcome the system and make it go the way we want. That's just not the case because we don't live in a democracy. And they've ensured that you believe that you find it so hard to believe that we don't, that you keep trying the same thing and expecting different results. I say the same thing because Kennedy is running as a Democrat. He's not even running as an independent, which he should be doing. He's not even running as a Green or any other party. He's running as a Democrat. Well, it's the only way he can win. Well, that's the only way we've ever done it for the longest time. So people can't imagine something outside of that. And further, and I think I've talked about this before, when we look at what Mexico has done, and Terry is going to be doing several episodes on that with WTF is happening in Latin America. But this is the thing is Mexico, whose elections are also next year, whose elections I'm also worried about, and Venezuela are having elections next year. I'm more concerned about those because I feel that we need to protect these countries because the United States wants to intervene in both of these countries, whether it's via the idea of these narco, trafficking mafias that are in Mexico. And I'm not saying they're not, but I'm saying who started all of this, right? And or whether it's the communist regime dictatorship of Maduro. We're already set to intervene in these countries, and we've been doing so. And after coming back from Venezuela, it's even more apparent what the people of Venezuela went through. And I know we've been to Nicaragua, I know we've been to Honduras, I know we've been to all of these countries, but Venezuela is I was on another level. It's similar to Cuba. They've undergone sanctions that have drastically hurt the economy. And honestly, my personal interaction with countries that have been undergoing sanctions is completely different because living in one of them, it has really created an issue for many of us. So we understand it at a different level. So to us, when you're sanctioning, blockading, when you're doing this to these countries, that's not just like, oh well, this person is just bad on this issue. That's like okay, well, this person isn't going to actually change their foreign policy. So with that started, I just want to say Mexico was able to build up the Morena party in about a little over 20 years. They were able to do it. We haven't even started doing that because we're so busy telling people that the only way to win in a rigged system is by participating in it and thinking you can win playing its rules, and you can't. So that's the way I'm going to start this off. So in an effort of time, just please share this. I only got to share the Rumble and the YouTube, but if you can share, please, that helps, because we're definitely not in the algorithm. And I've been wanting to do a show. I hate not doing a show, but I have been so swamped. I can't even tell you how swamped I've been. But let's get started, because shout out to Oz, who on the fly has really been there for us, and Jamie, our other engineer, as well. So Oz, let's get started. So let's start with the Kennedy Zionism video, because this is one I didn't get a chance to talk to about. Everybody has talked about this, including Pasta. Everybody has really dived into this, right? But this is somebody that is I am, like you guys know, diehard pro-Palestinian, and I'm not afraid to say that. I don't have any ambitions to, run under the Democratic Party. I have no qualms about saying it. Even when I cover it, it is such a struggle to cover this issue, because I don't see covering it fairly. I don't see it as saying that Israel and Palestine are two equal sides. I don't think that's fair coverage. I think fair and truthful is saying what it is. Israel is an occupation. It's an apartheid state. Palestinians are going through a disastrous human rights violations of all kinds. It's an open air prison. And I intend on going to Palestine as soon as I can to really get these stories out. And I have lots of friends and that are, involved in this. And I have Palestinian friends. I consider their struggle the same as any peoples who are struggling under imperialism. So for me, if you're going to oppose the establishment, if you're going to call yourself anti-establishment, you should oppose the apartheid state of Israel. If you're going to call yourself anti-imperialist, or if you're going to call, I don't think RFK has ever called himself an anti-imperialist, right? I think people have called him that. He's not. Anti-establishment, why have they called him that? Well, because of the things he has said, right? He has talked about the war in Ukraine, and he has talked about it, at the very least, admitting that NATO and the United States had a lot of fault in this. He has been honest about that. He has said that. He talked about Victoria Nuland. He's talked about that the United States needs to get out and start really focusing on American people, on the domestic issues that American people are facing. I agree with all of that. I think that is refreshing. I think a lot of people haven't said that. If anybody has said it at the level he has said it. However, that also doesn't mean that because he is saying that he is being genuine. And even if he was being genuine, that he would be able to break through this two-party duopoly under the Democratic Party. And the reason I have doubted that is because of this. So this is the video interview he did with Glenn Greenwald. And in this one, he doesn't just support Israel in, like the way Donald Trump and Joe Biden have said, we support Israel, we're going to build blah, blah, blah. And like it's the classic, nod to the AIPACs, to the Israeli state, and of course to Israeli intelligence, because we really have to talk about British intelligence, Israeli intelligence, and US intelligence here. So it's not just a nod to that. He is literally, like, vociferously giving his full-on love to Israel. This isn't something like, that he's just saying in passing. And also there was the tweet about the rabbi immediately after he took his tweets down. Now people say, well, Kennedy probably got a phone call and, he probably got told to do the right thing or say the right thing. But that's not okay. Like, if we're not going to have anybody that's going to take on the powerful Israeli lobby, right? The powerful younger brother to the United States. That's basically its only job, is to expand in the Middle East and take over using US weapons, using their own weapons, using their intelligence apparatus. while the United States handles the Americas and Europe. That's really their goal. And if that is their goal, then I don't see how you can disassociate that from Western imperialism. So I think this is a tell. So let's just hear the video, and then I'm just going to there's a couple of videos, and I'm just going to say why I think it's just a red line.
Everything has a historical context in Israel, and if you look at why we don't have a two-state solution in Israel, which everybody now says they want. But both in 1947 and 1947, 1948, and then again in 2001, it was the Palestinian leadership that walked away from a two-state solution and pledged itself to the destruction of the Jewish people. Oh, and that, that's a very, very clear history. And I think at a time when they had a very, very generous solution on the table. Now, the other thing I say is Israel is a democracy, but it's a flawed democracy, just like the United States. But if I was a dissident Arab Palestinian, would I rather be a dissident in Israel or in Saudi Arabia or Oman or Qatar or any other Arab nation? If you're a dissident, you get up in the middle of the public square and denounce the government. Where would you rather be? You'd rather be in Israel. It's the only place you're not going to get in trouble. And we need to have the same standard for judging Israel as we judge other Arab countries. We should, and Israel is going into the West Bank and killing children. Is never doing that deliberately, never. And nobody has ever said it is.
Well, a lot of people have said it. A lot of people have said it is. But let me just ask you, because I just want to focus the.
In all of those other countries, it is the deliberate policy of those countries to attack and target civilians and to kill them. Israel is the model democracy in the Mideast. It's the only democracy in the Mideast. And as a democracy, it's a model for peacekeeping. There's never been a time in history when a democracy has gone to war with another democracy. So I think our policy in the United States should be to support the growth of democracies around the world. Everything has a historical context.
Okay. So I don't even know where to begin on that, on the just list of lies he said. I'll start with him saying that Israel is a democracy. Israel is not a democracy. Israel, with the help of Great Britain and the United States, essentially, was created to expand in the Middle East. They were created to oust and control the Arab region. That's exactly what they're trying to do. Israel is the country, by the way, that where people are having an internal squabble as to who is most fascist right now. They actually have a fascist government. They have the most right-wing government, I think, in most countries I've ever seen. Specifically, I'm talking about this because we cover a lot of this at RT in terms of what was going on between Bibi and his opponents and just how far right they've gone. I do not think they're a democracy on the fact that they have established themselves as an occupying force. It would be hypocritical to call them a democracy. I don't think the United States is a democracy either. So he goes on to say that Israel's a democracy, just like the United States. They're both flawed democracies. Well, they're both not flawed. They're both not democracies, period. And so if you can tell me right off the bat as a candidate that hasn't even won yet, right, that you're already won, giving all these accolades to an apartheid state like Israel, an apartheid occupation like Israel, and calling it a democracy. And then you're also calling the United States a democracy. There's one of two things here. Either you don't understand foreign policy or of what is the United States. You live in a different world where you still believe that Israel is a democracy and that the United States is a democracy, or you are choosing to say this because you're speaking to an audience whose votes you want to get. It could be a combination of the two, I don't know. The reality is that is not the truth. The truth is neither of these states are democracies. One is an occupying force. The other one, well, it was an occupying force. It, it established itself now for centuries, the United States, and now it has expanded via the Monroe Doctrine, via this idea of manifest destiny, into occupations via the military-industrial complex, via coups, via regime changes. Both of these countries are not democracies. If that's your idea of, if your idea of a democracy is the beautiful sounding words of democracy and freedom and the Star-Spangled Banner and all of this jingoism that comes via Israel and the United States, then sure, you can frame it that way, but that's not what it actually is. And the other thing I have is the painting of the Arab world as completely undemocratic. It sounded like the Arab nations are just beneath. They are less than. That's the way the rhetoric came out. Why? Because he's saying, if I were a dissident, I would go to Israel more than any other Arab country in the world. He hasn't been to these other Arab countries. He has no idea what he's talking about. There are more women in universities in Iran than there are in other parts of the world. I mean, really. And the reality is, just because we don't agree with their religion, we don't understand it, doesn't mean that somehow what our idea of democracy is as Western Americans is the only valid form. And if you have this mindset already that this is how the world is, I don't trust you. I believe you have the same mindset as pretty much everybody else in the establishment. So how can I call you anti-establishment? See, this isn't just about Palestinians and about Israel. Sure, I'm not willing to throw them under the bus. This is about how you view the world and how someone like you is going to lead with those set views of the world where you still think the United States is above, that the Western world, like the United States, Israel, and NATO, are somehow better than everybody else. And that mindset is what leads you to make turns towards imperialism, even if you don't intend to in the beginning. You're already making these concessions. You're already putting this American exceptionalist view out there. So what can I expect you to do from there on? I can expect you to go even further, to continue to work with these imperialist points of views. I don't expect any candidate, even if they were the perfect candidate, to go in there and be able to do too much, because we have this system, correct? So at this rate, from what he said, I just don't believe he is a candidate that is going to be much different. I think we can go to the next thing, Oz. I think there's another video.
I disagree, I would say fiercely, with his criticism of Israel. And I'm not, there are enough people who characterize those political differences anti-Semitic that me endorsing him felt like I was buying into that, into something that was abhorrent to me. Roger, like many critics of Israel, first of all, people who criticize Israeli policy should not be characterized as anti-Semitic. But people who apply a different standard to judging Israel than they would to judging an Arab country, I think then that you've crossed a line there. And I do think that Roger does that. I've now looked at some of his stuff, and I think, like I said, I do not think people who criticize that people who criticize Israel policies should not be called anti-Semitic. But I do think that many people are applying, or Israel's critics are applying, a double standard.
Okay, so first of all, Roger Waters, the whole deleted tweet, we've talked about it ad nauseum. Roger Waters is a person that throughout his music and his artwork has always been on the side of the people. He has been anti-fascist in the real sense of the word. And he's been obviously an ardent supporter of Palestinian rights. He is not an anti-Semite, and he has not crossed any line. There's a difference between Zionism and people supporting the slaughter of innocent people who believe in the Hebrew faith, right? There's a difference, and I do believe that some people that there are people out there that literally say, the hateful things like eliminate all these people. That's not where I'm at. I'm talking about Zionists. I'm talking about Zionism, which I see no different than fascism. It is another onset of that. Anybody who bases their identity and religion as being the supreme religion of all, the supreme identity of all, being the chosen people that are above everyone else, to me, has a fascistic point of view. Whether you're a Hebrew, whether you're Christian, whatever the hell you are, it doesn't matter. I have I equal opportunity on that. Like that, if whether you're Islamic, whether you're Christian, Jewish, whatever, you could even be like atheist and have that point of view. There's much of that around the world right now. And that's irrelevant. So even though he says, well, just because you criticize Israel doesn't make you an anti-Semite, he's still saying that what Roger did was wrong. And Roger did nothing wrong. He has been one of the most critical people when it comes to Israel, because that's what it needs to be. Because everybody else around the world, including most governments around the world, have turned their eye away from what Israel's been doing for various reasons around the world. And so this is something that has to be talked about at the level it has to be talked about. So I just don't understand that if you're already deleting tweets, if you're already bending over backwards to placate to Israel, to me, it just says so much, especially when we know your family members have died at the hands of Israeli intelligence. Let's be real here. We know Sirhan did not act on his own. We know that he happened to be Palestinian. Do you think that wasn't done on purpose, right? At this point, like how naive could we really be? And it's really more than because of that. People have created this theory that he is somehow just saying these things because he's afraid of the Israeli lobby and he knows he has to take them down. But this is like this whole 5D chess thing that Trump, that Bernie, that all these people were supposedly playing never came out to be true. I have no reason to believe that this man is also playing 5D chess. I'm sticking with the facts here. I'm sticking with what his family has done and said for the longest time. And his family has, and he has admitted, been a longtime supporter of Israel. So I really don't see it much different. And we can just go ahead and put this tweet up, Oz, so we can read it, because I do think this really cements it. I mean, this is one of the most Zionist tweets I've ever seen from any candidate. He says, to ensure the security of Israel and indeed the Iranian people, Iran must not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. This is non-negotiable. It will require constant vigilance and stringent verification. Just on that, Iran is a country that it's a sovereign country. It's going to do what Iran wants to do. We have no jurisdiction over what Iran should do. Again, it's this American exceptionalist, America first perspective, but when it comes to foreign policy, which is dangerous. The JCPOA is based on an outdated assumptions and conditions and is not appropriate to our time, but I will set my sights on real peace in the Middle East, including between Israel and Iran. You can't have real peace in the Middle East by supporting Israel, because Israel has already threatened Iran. It has already attacked Iran, just like we have. And how can you have peace in the region when you're coming from a position of, if you don't do what I say, we're going to come after you? He's already laying out that foundation as to how he's going to act. When I am president, we will set a new standard for international behavior. The U.S. bears historical culpability for much of the tension in the region. And this is what he does. He says, we're guilty, but blah, 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 right? And so he talks about regime change operations, coups, and so forth for despotic regimes in Iran and elsewhere. So again, he goes back and really gives you the same State Department talking points when it comes to Iran. And so really, I see this position as pretty much being a right-wing position that is just a little bit less interventionist on paper, because we really have no measurement as to how he would be. He has never been a politician, so we can only go off of what he said, what he's written before. And so I think this sets a really dangerous precedent. And this is aside from the fact that, the whole Palestinian issue is a red line to me. this is just in general, just the support of Israel, I think, is a very imperialist position to have, and definitely an establishment one. He is getting put on TV, by the way, on mainstream media channels. Yes, he's garnering a lot of attention and support, but you have to really think critically about this. Who really is supporting him? It's a lot of people that were defected from the two-party system, right? Like that were completely done with it. You have a lot of people who really saw the COVID narrative supporting him, people who are really independent minded, people who would otherwise be perfect to start a counter movement, a real counter movement. Now all of those people are going to vote Democrat. And sure, it's not going to matter if he loses. Those votes aren't necessarily going to go to Joe Biden. In fact, more than likely, they're not. They're going to go to Trump. But it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you haven't created this same momentum for an outside candidate. Instead, you're doing it into the Democratic contingent, and the Democratic contingent is going to have all this data on all these people. Do you think that they're not collecting the data as to how to pursue this type of voter? Do you think that COVID, the narrative, hasn't been co-opted at all? Do you somehow think that COVID and how smart you are and how smart some of us were on seeing the narrative of COVID is somehow immune to the co-option that's been done to every single movement throughout history, whether it was a civil rights movement, whether it's the LGBTQ movement, or any sort of movement like that? Black Lives Matter, you think only the movements like that are the ones that are co-opted? Movements on the left and right are all co-opted by the intelligence apparatus, because they're always a few steps ahead and they know how to do that. And I believe that this is the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy, of what is being used for Junior, of what it's being used for, because it just seems to perfectly really get all those people. The United States right now is in a time period where the vast majority of Americans don't trust the government. The vast majority of Americans are unhappy with the political establishment. So instead of trying to fight that, what you're going to get is these figures that are supposed to be opposition, but at the end of the day, they really don't offer an actual opposition movement towards the status quo, just the illusion of one. We saw it with Bernie Sanders on the progressive contingent, and now we're seeing it with the more non-progressives. We're seeing it with the more independent sort of populist movements, because that is a movement right now that I believe is the strongest and it was the most likely to actually have some sort of change. But guess what? You clipped its wings when you put it inside the Democratic Party, and that's exactly what is being done here. And it's really crazy to me that people don't see it, because it's the same type of steps. It's the same type of playbook that we're seeing. And I think you have to be more removed from it to see it, maybe, because I haven't been living in the United States for a year now, and I've been looking at things from a different lens. And I don't know if that's what it is. And others that I know who are living abroad also see it. And people living in the United States right now, it just seems like they're so eager to find somebody to get them out of Biden, because I get it. Joe Biden sucks. Joe Biden is like top, worst presidents we've had. And I agree he's a war criminal. I agree he's gotten us into so much trouble, both foreign and domestically. But that doesn't mean that this is going to be much different. And I think people need to be honest about who RFK is and who RFK isn't. And I don't think they're being honest. I think they're creating an idea of who they want him to be rather than who he is. So this clip got a lot of people upset, because there was this whole situation that basically said that, okay, well, Kennedy is he's been completely and the most anti-war candidate we've had, and that's just not the case. So if we can just play this clip, this is the longer clip, Oz, and yeah, let's play the clip and then we'll discuss it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And we know that the Chinese are developing ethnic bioweapons that are designed to attack people of certain racial types. And we're doing the same thing. We've been collecting Chinese DNA We've been collecting Russian DNA specifically for that. This arms race is a catastrophe. You know, in 1969, we had developed by then nuclear equivalency with bioweapons, so we could eliminate the same numbers of people with bioweapons at, I think, 29 cents a death. They calculated, the Defense Department and the CIA calculated at that time. And President Nixon did the most extraordinary thing. He went to Fort Detrick and he said, we are unilaterally ending the bioweapons arms race. We are giving up all of our bioweapons. We're going to destroy them. We're going to disable the capacity at Fort Detrick, and we're not going to make them anymore. And 3 years later, almost all the nations on the earth signed a charter stopping bioweapons production. And the problem was the CIA continued to do secret bioweapons production in our country. The Russians found out about that and rejigged their program. And then after 2001, we passed the Patriot Act, which reopened the arms race, which basically canceled out Nixon's 1979 agreement treaty and launched a new bioweapons arms race, and everybody else in the world is doing it. And the impacts, as you point out, Greta, are horrific. We need to stop it. We need to go to all those nations, and we need to say to them, let's get rid of all the bioweapons.
Okay, so a couple things here. He said some good things about the United States getting rid of the bioweapons, right? He talked about how we have been in this nuclear arms race, and then that caused other countries to start building their bioweapons. All of that is true. I think it's great he pointed it out. And again, I will say he is the best candidate running as a Democrat. We'll see Marianne Williamson's terrible answers on Russia, Ukraine in a minute, but he still points to China being as the peril. And that was my issue with this whole Ukraine situation, that he still points to Russia as being the major aggressor rather than more than NATO, or as equivalent to NATO. And nobody right now is actually right on this stuff, even Cornell West, and I'll talk about him briefly as well. Nobody has really gotten this right. And this is where we are, right? Like, he is the best Democratic candidate. He is better on Russia, Ukraine than even Cornel West. He is obviously better on COVID. None of this stuff is negating that. I am simply saying I do think that this is not what he is not what people are making him out to be. He is less imperialistic. He's still imperialistic. He is less establishment. He's still establishment. And when he talked about China, he still pointed to that caveat where you could blame China. You could still say China bad, China this. And when you have that open perspective, the same way it was with Israel, you're creating this opening to where the United States can continue their aggression on China via Taiwan. Anthony Blinken was just there lying, saying he was in Beijing, saying, the United States supports the one China policy, blah, blah, blah. And he got called out because the United States has done nothing but not support the China one policy. They've been arming Taiwan. They've been going into the South China Sea. They've been escalating tensions by sending top politicians like Nancy Pelosi and other politicians to Beijing and to Taiwan, and they're doing military drills. And so that's sure, I can say I support the one China policy on paper. I can say a lot of things, and then my actions could say something completely different. So this is what I mean. People are so focused on what he says only, but the way he says things leaves it open for there to be continued aggression toward China. And he is opening himself to the potential of being allowed to do that on the basis of, well, we have to stop China because China is developing these bioweapons. But I have seen no evidence. I'm not saying that China is absolutely not developing bioweapons, but the way he is pointing it is it's almost like China is doing this, so we're doing this too, but China is doing this, so we have to continue watching them. And when it comes to bioweapons, Ukraine was literally recently discovered, one of the most discovered areas of bioweapons, and they were specifically genetically engineered to be different based on the person's ethnicity. And that is huge. I mean, especially for someone that is COVID aware, that knows about everything that happened with COVID and how this could potentially have been a bioweapon. We think of what it is, but it's just, you know, to me, he should know better. He should know who is the number one arbiter, no ands, ifs, or buts, and just take accountability for that, regardless of China, regardless of any other country. There's always that but China, but Russia at some point, and I think that has to be something that is really looked at, because when you leave those openings, that means we're going to go somewhere. And so that is something that I had a huge issue with, as to how he presented that information. And I wasn't the only one. There's been a lot of criticism for RFK when it comes to that. And I think we do have the next tweet, Oz, where he talks about that, where the same thing he was talking about, where this Angelo pointed this out, Angelo Giuliano, I'm sorry, not Giuliani, Angelo Giuliano pointed that what RFK has done. And just for reference, Angelo does live in China, so he has a direct on the ground perspective on China. So he said what RFK has done is just segmentation of market, like they do in marketing. He has identified discontent on Ukraine, 2, vaccines / lockdowns, and 3, deep state, while he is giving all the support to Israel and calling the China threat the yellow peril. He is doing the same as Obama did. Obama had positioned himself as anti-war, denounced Iraq aggression, and called for universal health care to ultimately make the military-industrial complex, the pharma industry, richer and average Joe poorer. So I mean, Angelo has a very good point here, and I think he said something else. I just want to make sure we get it all. Okay, yeah. He also added that the single fact that he has been given access to the election and given platforms to speak already proves that he is being pre-selected by the elites. The final elections will be amongst pre-selected by the elites, individuals that will maintain the status quo and work for U.S. elites. For the U.S. globalist agenda of endless wars, for the WEF agenda, you will own nothing and be happy. Voting here becomes criminal. You become complicit. You give legitimacy to a rigged system. Hundreds years of elect, regret, elect, regret, elect, regret. And so what he's saying here is exactly what I'm saying in a sense. I used to think the American public, and I still think the American public, are victims to the system, but now you have some accountability. You have some fault because you're legitimizing the system knowingly by continuing to put up candidates and give credence to candidates that are basically only saying some things that are anti-establishment in order to get people to jump on this bandwagon. And, you know, the reality is there might have been good intentions at some point on some of these candidates like Bernie Sanders, or there could be some with RFK, but how we don't really know that. And I can only go off of what he has said so far on the biggest issues in the world, which are Russia, Ukraine, Israel, China, all of this foreign policy. And then look at who his audience is. And I agree with Angelo. The most important point he made, I thought, is the Ukraine vaccine lockdowns and deep state. He has identified the discontent. And I don't think it's he that has identified the discontent as much as the intelligence apparatus that has identified the discontent, and where you could grab more people to help them justify the continued Zionist interactions that we've been having in the world stage, where you could grab most people from that and make them supportive of that, where you could have people continue to support U.S. exceptionalism, like, okay, we're going to cut back here, but we're also going to increase here. It's that mentality. So you're not really opposing, you're just showing a semblance of reform. And it's just not, it's not real, it's not long lasting, because it's not a real solution. So that's that. And the last part I wanted to show on RFK was his nuclear power speech that he gave recently that people were raving about, because I do want to be fair and show some of the good things he has said, and then also point out to how he still leaves it open to interpretation as to how he says things. This is a very politician or political thing to do where you say something against the establishment, but you leave it open in case you have to go back. So let's hear what he said here. A lot of people were raving about this speech in particular. So this is just an excerpt.
Nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either humiliating retreat or a nuclear war. The shameful fact is that for the last 20 years, the advocates of a militaristic foreign policy within the U.S. leadership have done exactly the opposite. Their belligerent strategy of maximum confrontation extends beyond Russia to China, where the same group within our government hopes to use Taiwan as a geopolitical pawn, the same way they used Iraq and Syria and now Ukraine, to further a vain fantasy of world domination through violent confrontation. Nuclear powers.
Okay, so this isn't the whole thing, but I just wanted to point out what he said that was good, that really a lot of people really liked. And he's right. I mean, for the last decades, we have been just ramping up the power and headed towards nuclear confrontation more than any other country. He doesn't really say any other country, but he addresses the fact that they're doing the same thing now with Ukraine and Taiwan. So pointing these out is great, but when you point them out and then still say, but these people are, you have the Yellow Peril, you have Putin, the criminal, and blah, 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 then you still leave it open for us to do these. There's no need to say, even if you don't like Putin, even if you think he's a criminal, there's no need to say that. Even if you think China is a danger, there's no need to say that. What you need to do is focus on how to de-escalate these tensions. And I don't think he has been doing that. In the majority of his long-form interviews, he'll say a mixture of things that leads me to believe he is still leaving it open. So overall, I don't see Kennedy as an anti-establishment candidate. Perhaps he is the most seemingly anti-establishment candidate running as a Democrat. And he definitely gives credence to this idea that he would de-escalate war. But let's be real here, he wouldn't be in charge even if he did win. The military-industrial complex and national security state apparatus would be in charge. And if you have to already bend over backwards to defend the imperialist state occupation of Israel, and if already you're signaling that, yes, you're going to have the anti-China discourse, and the Putin is a thug and all of this crap that has been said by like all of the candidates, then it shows to me that you're already you're gonna fold when it comes to it, because this is only the beginning. This is you running a campaign. You should be the most out there. You should be the most anti-war, the most anti-establishment. And I just don't see him as anything other than a Democrat. I mean, he has voted for Democrats for a long time. You can watch his record. He supported Hillary Clinton. He has written books that really denounce like any sort of socialism. He's pretty much your status quo. Like, I wouldn't even call him a Democrat. I would say he's more of a conservative. But I mean, at this point, it doesn't really matter what he is in terms of the Democrat-Republican situation. But he has gotten a lot of people from the COVID knowledge sector to really support him on the basis of that alone. And I understand if people are single issue voters, if that's your one issue and you think it's the most important issue, then I get it. But at the same time, for me, and having been to the rest of the world, that was definitely not everybody's most important issue. Their most important issue was not getting bombed, not eating every day, getting enough, having a roof over your head. And the COVID narrative seems to have been co-opted by a lot of people in the intelligence apparatus, because they know that people are seeing through these operations. And so don't think for a second that you're just your sector of and the anti-COVID, the anti-lockdown left or the independent-minded people are above that. You can still fall for these traps. And I think people should step back and really see at its core, is he really giving you much different the establishment, and I just don't see it. And I don't think it's a matter of him having better people on his campaign. People say, well, maybe he's just pretending, maybe he's just doing this, maybe, he's just misinformed. I think if you're going to run for president and you're misinformed, you shouldn't run for president. It's not fair that we demand better of ourselves than we demand of those who are running for high public office. Meaning, if I know this stuff, if you know this stuff, if people that watch the show or people that are well informed know this stuff, somebody who's going to be in the most powerful office of the country and perhaps one of the most powerful positions in the entire world should know far more. So if he doesn't know, that's just as bad, if not worse, of him knowing, and then really this being his viewpoint, right? This his support for Israel, his stance that the United States is a democracy and that the rest of these countries are not. So I do think that that's something that really makes me say no. For the record, I'm not voting for any of these candidates. None of them. People say, oh, you probably like Cornel. No, I like Cornel as a person. And I don't think Robert F. Kennedy as a person, it seems like a bad person. I've listened to his speeches. I thought they were phenomenal when it came to the COVID narratives. When I've heard him, this is not about me liking somebody. This is about what they stand for and who they really are. And politically, none of these candidates are there on foreign policy. So I'm not going to support them. But more than anything, we don't have fair elections. So, and none of them are addressing that at the way it should be addressed. Kennedy, I have to say, has addressed it more than others. But again, that's a lot. Also, his audience happens to be also the ones who have looked at it as well. So it's kind of interesting. He's hitting all the right points for his audience, but we'll see if that's actually genuine or not. Now, I do have to mention Pasta and give accolades to Pasta for the interview he did. I did send him my questions. I wasn't able to attend this interview with Cornell West, but I also think it's good in a way because I do think you get more of an intimate one-on-one discussion, and he was able to do that with Cornell. And I thought this was a great interview, and I thought it was the best one so far because he pushed Cornell on issues and questions he hasn't been asked for by a lot of our friends and independent media, because these are the issues that the Kennedy sphere is really concerned about. So Pasta, coming from that Kennedy sphere, is asking these questions. And I think, it's important that somebody like Cornell, who's primarily the leftist, candidate, he's running as a Green, and who's a real powerful speaker, real inspirational. I heard him speak a year ago at the, and I'm pretty sure he saw me at the People's Summit in Los Angeles. And, I went to the People's Summit despite the fact that the People's Forum in New York, which is basically PSL, they're all basically PSL, denied untreated people based on their vaccination status. I wasn't asked for my vaccination status. I went as a journalist and I covered it, and some of my friends were there. It was good to really see this pushback against Biden's exclusion of Nicaragua, Venezuela, Cuba from the People's Summit of the Americas. So it was good to see that. I go to places despite the fact that there are people that I don't like in these places. I mean, there was definitely people that had blocked me on Twitter in those places, and I still went because I think it's important. And I would go to the Rage Against the Machine if I had the chance to have gone. And I would have gone to all these other marches because I think it's important that we are speaking against nuclear armament. And I think that is something that RFK is bringing to the table. I think that's something that I'm pretty sure Cornell has mentioned it, but not at the same capacity. And so I got to give Pasta props for asking him these questions. So I want to play this little clip and then urge you all to go watch the interview on YouTube. It's on Rumble, but it's being, I guess, shadow banned on both platforms, but it's also on Rockfin. So make sure to give it a decent look because everybody's raving about this interview because I think it's one of the best interviews Pasta's ever done. And I do got to give him accolades for that and commend him for that as well. So here's a clip. If you haven't seen it, you should see it.
With our good friend Cornel West.
I want to begin by saluting both of you, your leadership, your persons who work with you, be they your interlocutors as well as those behind the scenes.
So let's just jump right into it, Dr. West.
Yes, indeed.
You are planning to go into Trump land and to speak to Trumpers and try to connect with them. How can you connect with them if you continuously call Trump a neo-fascist? I'm a little bit bothered by that same language towards Vladimir Putin. Putin's a thug, Putin's a gangster. I mean, if you're going to be the president of the United States, how are you going to sit down with a man across from you who you're supposed to getting rid of nuclear weapons and try to convince him of that? How are you going to talk peace? And I'm never going to vote for Biden. I'm never going to vote for Donald Trump. But if you put a gun to my head, Dr. West, and said I had to vote for either one of the two, I'm voting for Donald Trump. We're on the brink of World War III here now. Can you see the hypocrisy there?
I think it was really good that he made that point. I think it was really good that he just put that out there.
How do we get this message across that people are coming to our southern border because of our foreign policy?
No, but see, I think you're hitting on something very, very important.
In your mind, was the 2020 election fair? You regret kind of uplifting Dr. Fauci in this situation? Because people have said to me, they're like, you should ask Dr. West. It seems like there's more than one crack pipe going around.
I appreciate the challenge, and I appreciate you pushing me. And there are times in which I've got to get off the crack pipe, too. I acknowledge that now.
Would you still say the vaccine is safe and effective, or would you recommend against it?
Yeah. So Pasta really went there. He went and asked the questions other people did not dare to ask because they like Dr. Cornel West. I like Dr. Cornel West. I think he's great on many issues. I still don't think he's, I don't think any of these candidates are equipped to be president. But I do have to say the worst candidate has been Marianne Williamson when it comes to the Democrats and third parties as well. Cornell, at least, he's really going to Israel-Palestine. He's still got a ways to go on foreign policy, but it's just, Marianne Williamson is really being promoted there as the hippie candidate, right? Like the candidate that is progressive, that is left on the Democratic Party. But Marianne Williamson is a hypocrite because she used to be extremely anti-vaccine. I mean, I'm talking anti-vaccine in general. And she has been insulting RFK for that. And here's the thing, if you're going to criticize RFK, you don't criticize him for what he's good at. He's actually right on COVID. He's actually right on a lot of these issues. And what has been happening recently, with the Joe Rogan interview, is all of these actual quacks that were wrong on COVID have been going on mainstream media and going to Mehdi Hassan and those, hacks and pretty much complaining about RFK as an anti-vaxxer. And the only thing that does is make him more popular because you're literally contributing to some a belief that a lot of people in the United States have about the whole COVID and how it was handled and the effectiveness of the vaccines. Because even though the CDC has said the vaccines are safe and effective, a lot of people disagree with that. And for rightful reasons, they have had doctors, studies done, a plethora of things that have happened in the last 3 years. And so to be calling somebody that and to be, and to be yelling at somebody for saying this is a proxy war, that Ukraine, Russia is a proxy war, which she does here, is really just pathetic. It's pathetic because his criticism of the United States and NATO is milquetoast at best. I mean, I was criticizing Kennedy, I don't want to say left from the left, but from a more anti-imperialist standpoint. And here she is giving the State Department talking points and basically condescending and being extremely rude against RFK for calling it a proxy war when that's exactly what this is. And so when your candidate can't even do that, and when she has had 2 campaign managers quit in successive, 2 of them, one, Peter Dow, I interacted with on Twitter. I don't think we follow each other anymore, but he was quite popular for, exposing the fact that he was wrong on the elections and all that. And then there's another one that was part of the California Democratic Party, I think Rosa, and she I knew from the California Democratic Party as well. See, we were involved with a lot of our friends that were trying to infiltrate the California Democratic Party. She was one of these people that was an up-and-coming person. I don't really know much about her politics anymore, I think it's Rosa Calderon is her name. But the fact that you have campaign managers dropping left and right signals that there's something up here. And I've had other people who've had interactions with Marianne that have been extremely negative, and I can't speak for myself other than the fact that she would say she was going to come to an Assange event and she wouldn't. And so I know Misty can talk about that as well because we were at these places. So yeah, I mean, I obviously don't trust her at all. I think she is just running for herself, but let's hear what she says here because it is really troubling and it really shows you just how far bottom our American electoral politics is.
Russia-Ukraine war. I know you've said we should fund more or give more weapons to Ukraine. Where are you at with this crisis today?
There are people who seem to think that if you know how to put the word proxy in the same sentence as the word war, that you have it all figured out. Well, I don't think it's quite that simple. There are many people who just use that phrase proxy war as though that's it. This is a complicated situation. Did the United States meddle? Yeah, we obviously did. Should we have put those Aegis missiles in Poland? Absolutely not. But a lot of that conversation on the left in America today leaves out any sense of agency for the Ukrainians, for the Latvians, for the Estonians, for the Lithuanians. Look at what Finland is doing now. Finland was neutral for decades and has now joined NATO. So I do not buy the picture that Ukrainians aren't people. They're somehow cardboard cutouts, and they have simply done what we told them to do. This is not the United States removing Mossadegh and putting in the Shah of Iran. I don't believe that that's what 2014 was. I believe that if you look at the way the Ukrainians are fighting right now, Kim, the kind of spirit that those people are showing, that doesn't come from people who are just working at the behest of the U.S. State Department. So and I also resent people saying like, they're the pro-peace candidate if they haven't figured out how we got here. No, excuse me, we all agree on how we got here. 85, 90% of what you said, I would agree with. The point is, what are you going to do now? If somebody says, okay, we're going to completely withdraw any support right now, the last thing that would happen there is peace. There would be such a crushing war and a destruction of Ukraine. There has to be a diplomatic solution. Denmark, for instance, has now offered to do a summit. They've said it can't just be Ukrainian allies. It has to also be India, also be China, also be Brazil, all of which is realistic. Like I said, it's a multipolar world now. We should be supporting those diplomatic efforts, and I absolutely would.
Okay, so just she's all over the place here. She's giving you the State Department talking point that Ukraine began this war for themselves with Russia, that this isn't a proxy war, that the U.S. and NATO, based on the emotional aspect of how Ukrainians are fighting, which she clearly knows nothing about. She clearly knows nothing about the issue. So it's almost comical to try to retort this because there's not much else to say. And it's really, she's layering all of this on the basis of the emotional tug and pull that gets progressives in the West to go, oh yes, the people of Ukraine are seeking their freedom. The United States and NATO don't care about the people of Ukraine seeking their freedom. And I guarantee you, if you tomorrow stop sending arms to Ukraine, Russia would seize and find a way to stop this and end this war right now with assurances, of course, as long as these assurances happen. Because Finland wanting to join NATO and Sweden didn't happen because of Russia. This happened because the U.S. and NATO want to put their weapons on Russia's border. They have said this for decades. They have said they wanted this for a long time. And that's what's happening. And there's no other, that's the truth. And so when you try to move the accountability away from what it really is, it really shows me, one, you have no idea about foreign policy, or you're lying to really placate to your certain audience that is pro-Ukrainian. And that's exactly what I think she's doing, because that is a large portion of her audience, what we call the neoliberal, the shit-lib left. Like, it's just like, they're pretty much the imperialist leftists that have pretty much swallowed every State Department talking point And so I think she's like the worst candidate right now running, besides Biden, of course. And yeah, it's just in terms of the Democratic Party. But I could talk about this stuff all day, guys. I do have another interview to run to. So what I am going to mention on Venezuela and Alex Saab and Lawfare is tell you that I will have an episode where Terry and I talk about this and at length. So I'm going to mention just Oz that I went and then I did a speech. And if you want to show the picture, Oz is fine. I'll explain. Alex Saab is basically a political prisoner. He is a Venezuelan diplomat. He was imprisoned for the crime of basically providing medications and food to the Venezuelan population. He is a diplomat, just so you know, it is against international law to jail and to arrest a diplomat. He was arrested twice. Well, he was detained twice. First under the presidency of Donald Trump and then under the presidency of Joe Biden. Now, what this basically means is that it doesn't matter who's president, and this is how I'll finish up, because either way, you are going to have situations of lawfare. You're going to have situations where there's a disrespect to the system of diplomats, and we've seen this throughout the Western world. We've seen it with the case of Alex Saab in the diplomatic sense, holding a diplomatic passport, a diplomatic identity. The United States, of course, bases it on the fact that they didn't recognize Maduro as the legitimate president, and Maduro is the one who appointed Saab as a diplomat. Therefore, Saab isn't a diplomat because the U.S. doesn't recognize Maduro as the president. Didn't at that moment, but they do now, don't they? They have said as much. So it's just it's not really based on legality. It's not really based on a judiciary process where there is a legal basis. It's more so a political persecution. And we've seen the political persecution play out in Julian Assange, who is also a political prisoner facing 175 years in U.S. prison for the crime of publishing U.S. and Western war crimes. And it's not about the fact of him committing a crime. It's the fact that what he released is really exposes the hegemony of the United States. And so with Saab, it was about the fact that he was able to get these goods, the fact that despite the attempting blackmail and the attempting betrayal that they tried with Iranian ship conductors, they denied it and they were able to deliver these goods. The fact that Saab is viewed as a hero by a large contingent of the Venezuelan population for really getting these goods to a sanctioned country. And I don't think people understand what I mean by sanctioned country, because it is impossible for people to understand unless you have gone through it. I think it is what these countries like Venezuela have endured under U.S. sanctions, under blockades. It's so hard to put into words, but all I can say is that people are still suffering the consequences of these sanctions, and you see it every day, and you see it when you go there. And it is done as nothing but a means to suffocate the people to the point where they turn against their government so they can come running to the hands of the United States. That's exactly why it's done, and there's no other reason as to why it's done. So I will be talking more about Alex Saab, and you can show the pictures. This is what I saw in Venezuela. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful country. I was only there for a short time. I intend on coming back for the elections, and I want to see the best elections in the world. They have been labeled as such, and the people of Venezuela are very kind and were very welcoming to me. And I do hope for the freedom of Alex Saab. He has children. He has a wife who was very nice, and she was doing a lot of the organizing for this with a lot of the Free Alex Saab movement in Venezuela and in the United States. So I really hope for his release. It was important to get a lot of journalists out there, and I met a lot of great people. So I'm hoping to continue to explore those relationships and continue, of course, talking about this. So please watch the WTF episode. We will promote it when it comes up, where I'll be talking more in depth about this and the Latin American aspect. So thank you all for watching, and yeah, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on Friday live with Pasa and I together if I don't kill him. So Much love to you all. I appreciate you. Convo out. Oh my God,
windows, the Polish police refusing to allow our delegation to disembark. With us, we have at least 100 members of the security personnel, some of them special task force, others are members of the PPS who were supposed to go ahead of the president into Ukraine.